Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear us first time out of the gate this time. And hello, Ben Marriott. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Flynn. Yeah. How are you? Great to finally hear you.
Yes, it is very good. And hello, chat. Hey, Eva, Angelica, Logan, Alex Mills is in the house. What's up, Alex? Johanna, thank you so much for moderating the chat for us today. Festus, what do you think about my background? I stayed up all night putting up all this baffling just for you, dude. So I hope you do appreciate it. Please let us know. Um, but yes, Ben, we had a great day yesterday.
We
The
did.
only thing is we ran out of time. Um,
We did.
everyone just has so many questions for you, so we've actually extended today. Today we're going to go for an hour and a half, so we've got plenty of time for questions. We're going to come back to some of the questions we had yesterday, answer your new questions today. Not Ben, not your questions, the questions from chat. But if you have any questions, of course, I'll try my hardest. But how about we have a bit of a recap of yesterday? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So yesterday we were focused on this animation here, our little planet dude doing a
Mm,
little meditation over this cosmic pond, and we covered really how to add some subtle-ish effects that are really just build atmosphere onto your illustrations that don't require an awful lot of animation knowledge. There's not a lot of keyframing or any real timing. We were adding sort of the glows, this glow around this orbiting planet, and we covered that animation, and then the glowing around the sort of the atmosphere of the big planets that kind of move and warp around, and how to layer those so that your glow looks really natural, and then how you can do that with a gradient of colors as well. So it's blue near the edge here, and then gets a bit more purple as it fades out.
mm.
And then we covered quickly adding a reflection, which is super easy, can be done in a few minutes, and just adds a whole lot of production value, and doubles what it looks like you've animated
Yes,
in a really simply.
double the
And then my
value.
favorite things to do. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And hey, everyone in chat, a couple more people as well. Maquias, I'm probably saying that wrong. Tyson, that was a lot easier for me to say. How you doing? So if you're just joining or if you're watching on YouTube, jump on over to behance.net/live to join the chat because we're going to have a bit of an interactive kind of day today. We want your questions. We've got some time set aside to answer all of them. Ben's going to tell us what his favorite dinosaur is and answer all the other questions that you might have.
Absolutely.
Cool. We're going to cube animate back into your screen, Ben, and maybe we could, kick off, have a bit of a chat about what we're going to learn from you today.
All right, today we're doing something a little bit different. Some stuff that I haven't really covered before on my YouTube because it's not really related to illustrations that much.
Mhm.
So here's what we'll cover making today. We'll cover sort of 3D tracking in After Effects, and then comping in and removing a green screen from this dude in the background. And this is stuff that when I first learned about After Effects, this is stuff I thought you need to have a big Hollywood VFX studio to do this stuff. But
Right.
like this literally takes minutes in After Effects. It is a lot more easier than it looks. And before I was, a freelancer, when I was working in staff positions, this was the kind of stuff I spent a lot of the day doing. Not so much the comping of the green screen guy, but a lot of adding text to sort of drone shots of buildings, and
Right.
more motion graphic-y stuff, which I think is a lot more realistic for the day-to-day life of a motion designer.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Excellent. So how about we get started? And we're going to get started in this desert scene. So let me remove this effect because we're going to add that. So this is some aerial footage. I don't think this was quite taken with a drone, but these days you get so much drone footage. If you're doing like a corporate video that's trying to sell, a corporation or doing something, they're probably going to have drone footage of
Mm.
cities and landscapes, and you're probably going to have to add text over them at some point. But it is really easy to track into footage like this. So to do that, we're just going to open a tracker window down here. This should be available in most workspaces, but if you just go up to Window and then View a Tracker, which is down here, that'll bring up these options here. So with that footage selected, we're just going to select Track Camera. And that adds this effect, and already we can see it's analyzing in the background, step 1 of 2. And this is going to be really quick. I've shortened this footage down to 3 seconds, and so it's like 90 frames, and we can see here in the top, it's already 40% through analyzing this footage. So it takes really no time at all. We can see it's just got a few seconds remaining. So here and you can also set this tracking and then go and do another shot as well. And this will just keep going in the background. People can see now it's already done. We've got all these track markers all over our scene. And if we scrub forward, they stick to their footage. After Effects does some magic where it figures out, what this pixel is and where that pixel moves throughout the shot. And then same with these ones in the background. And it can see that, these ones in the background aren't moving as much, so they must be further in the distance. And then it can figure out where the camera would be and create a digital camera. So we can just select create camera over here, and that'll give us a 3D camera over here. And that's pretty much done the tracking. Now we can just add any object to the scene. I'll start with adding some text, and I'll just type hi there in here. Let's make that a bit bigger. Let's make it Futura heavy. I like it bold. And scale it up.
It's a t-shirt.
Absolutely. And then, so at the moment, it's just a 2D layer and it's just stuck on top of our footage. No movement at all. But if we just select down here and make it a 3D layer, because we've got that 3D camera in there, it will behave like it's in the scene. So we can tick that. And then if we play it forward, it's tracked into the scene. Now here, it's pretty close to our camera by default. But if we select the arrow tool and zoom in, we've got these little directional tools here to push in its y-axis, its y-axis up here, its x-axis, and its z-axis facing forward as well. So if we zoom back out and move it on an x-axis, it will slide over to the left. We can push it up and down. And then by selecting Z, we can also push it further and backwards as well. And if you hold shift, you can push it back, a bit further, like a bit faster. So let's leave it at here and then see how that looks. So that's looking much closer to these mountains. That's great. And then let's select it again. You've got to be careful. Make sure you click these arrows and then push it over to the left. And then already we've got some text right here in our scene in less than a few minutes. And what else we can do is just to show how much depth we have here. We can duplicate this layer, and then this one and this one that's on top, we can just select the Z-axis and move it forward. And you can see we've got, parallax in there as well. So it all behaves completely, naturally as if this camera was in there. Back as well. Let's turn these down in transparency so it's a bit easier to see them. And you can really see sort of how nicely lined up they are.
And does this work for a lot of types of shots, or is it specifically drone shots or landscape? What are the other applications you can kind of use for text tracking commonly?
You can use this 3D tracker, this effect, in almost any shot. It works best for aerial and drone shots because there's so much the information really doesn't change. There's not a lot of objects interacting. If it was a close-up shot of two people fighting, like a boxing match or something like that, if it was really tied up and it was a really tight shot and you couldn't really see the floor or the ground or anything, it would struggle because it doesn't really know, because there's so many things moving more than the camera's moving. I'd say if the camera move is the most obvious thing in the shot, this is a really great way to track that.
Right.
Inside After Effects. And there are ways to say, if you can't get a good track with, say, a person walking in front of camera, you can also pre-comp your footage and just mask out that person and just cover them with a black shape. So the tracker doesn't get distracted. It just thinks it's a missing shot and only analyzes some things. So you can do a bit of a peekaboo, hide this, don't look at this After Effects for.
That's a good tip.
It. Yeah. So there we go. And now I think I'll cover another really useful way to track something, and that's doing a screen replacement. So we've got this footage here, and this is just of a woman watching an iPad. Let's view this. Let's center this. So she's viewing this iPad, and she's the most still person I've ever seen. In a lot of stock footage, you'll get people just being unrealistically still.
Unnaturally still, yeah.
I know. But she's viewing the iPad. It looks like she's holding pretty still, and it's only really our camera that's moving. So we could camera track this, but we don't know. She might be moving her hands a little bit back and forth, and we're not really interested in tracking into the environment. We just want to track to this object. So a really easy way to do that is to use, if we go back to our tracker window over here, let's select our footage and we can select track motion. So we want to track the movement of something, and that is our iPad. Now, the default is it gives us one track point, and then we could use this to track one object, say. But if we go down here to our track type, and it says transform, we can do perspective corner pin. So if we select that, it gives us 4 points. So all we need to do now is grab these little squares and drag them over to the corner of each of whichever screen you want to replace. Here's our iPad. So I'm going to drag these all in like this. And you want to be pretty precise. You want the sort of the intersection to line up pretty well.
Yeah.
And these two squares here, this middle square, what the middle square is doing is looking for these pixels. So every frame, it is going to look for this combination of pixels where it's green in the bottom right, and then we've got this black, and then it's kind of gray over here.
Oh, okay.
So it really helps to have a lot of contrast in your footage. If I was trying to track this scene over here, we'll have no hope, because in the next frame, those pixels might be over here, they might be over here. It's just not clear. So like out of footage focus is really hard to track. And then this outer rectangle is whereabouts it is going to look for these pixels in the next frame. So because this iPad isn't really moving much frame to frame, it's only moving a few pixels each frame, we don't need this to be very big. But if this lady was moving her iPad all over the place, we would need to enlarge this box a fair bit.
Right.
So that in the next frame it knows, okay, these pixels could be way over here. The reason we want to keep them pretty as small as we need them to be is because it just takes more time to track if it's analyzing every frame of the image for those pixels. It's like playing hide and seek in a small room versus in like an amphitheater.
Right.
So here we've got all of our corner pins already there, and one thing we need to do is add our screen to this layer here. So I've already got an iPad screen over here. Let me drag that into our timeline, and we can see this is just my intro, and I've put that to I've made this a 4:3 ratio because that's the ratio of an iPad screen is.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to our screen replacement, which is over here. We've got our tracking points, and here we've got edit target. So we can click here. We want to apply the motion to iPad screen layer, and it's chosen that because it's the only other layer in this comp. But just make sure that is chosen. And now we have our options over here to analyze. So we've got a few buttons here. We've got analyze one frame backward, analyze backwards, analyze forwards, and analyze one frame forwards. Let's start by just analyzing one frame forward. So let's click this, and it's going to move one frame and put one little position marker for each tracking point. And we can keep doing that, and we can see that each frame is moving it very slightly. So it seems to be working. It's figuring out this iPad is moving downwards slightly. So now we can click analyze forward, and it's just going to go through and do all of them. And it's going to do that pretty quickly. It might take a minute or so I've got like 3 seconds of footage here. But we've got 4 tracking markers on here, so it's doing 4 times the work. But normally this shouldn't take too long, more than a couple of minutes. Even a pretty intense shot that's pretty long, a coffee break is more than suffice to eat up that time.
Yeah.
And here we go. We're approaching the end here. Here it comes. All right, we are done. Now we can see really the motion path that this iPad has taken. Yeah, right. So each one of these squares is a keyframe that it's sort of moving the position of these points. And if we can sort of scrub through and see if that looks right. I mean, it looks fine here. And then all we need to do is press apply over here. And then it's going to work its magic.
Nice.
And already it's chucked that screen straight into the iPad. Let's turn that volume down. And it's added keyframes all over the place here. So every frame has a really a different keyframe for all of these corner pins. So really what it's done, it's added the effect corner pin, which is an effect you can add without any tracking. And that's really useful for changing perspective of something. If you need to match something to a wall, you can just drag these pins and change the perspective of your layer.
It's amazing.
You can do it straight from the tracker, and it just maps them straight to those 4 tracking points. So if we play it forward, we can see that it's tracked pretty nicely. There's, it looks, really stable in there. And this is a pretty good example of a shot to use. This is a pretty easy one to do. If, you have a lot of things coming in front of that object, or it goes in and out of focus, that's trickier. But for something like this, it's really simple. And most footage for this thing, if you were to get stock footage, it will normally be sort of filmed in order to be easily tracked.
Right.
It's very, very rare. Like normally, a studio will, on your first assignment filming footage for this stuff, you realize, that doesn't really work. That's going to cost us more time in post-production. And then you film it easier like this. So there's a few things I noticed here. There's a little bit of a green edge on the edge here. Now, an easiest way to do that is just bring up our scale property and just increase the scale by 1%. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of hidden behind it. And there we are.
Would you feather it all, like in an image like that? Or because it's a sharp image, you probably wouldn't?
You could certainly feather it. The way to do that would be, because it's hard to, I don't know, there might be an effect to just feather the edges. In fact, I'm sure there might be. But one way we could do that is by, we could just blur the edges. So if we add a Gaussian blur and apply that to our layer here, and let's bring this up to maybe 5%. Now the edges look a bit better, but it's blurrier in the image here. Now we might want to blur this anyway a bit, because this iPad looks slightly out of focus, and a blur might look realistic. But maybe a 2-pixel blur is kind of look good. But if we really want to match our edge to a 5-pixel blur, what I would do is duplicate this iPad screen, and then on this top layer, blur it to maybe, I'll do 10% so you can see it easier in the example. And then use this bottom one, select track matte, and then use the top one as an alpha matte. So it's using the alpha channel of this layer above that's blurry and has a feathered edge, but the only visible layer is this sharper image here. So this top one, let's turn this down to 5 pixels. There we are. Now, there's a few more things that we need to do to make this look, realistic in this scene. One is color matching. And I'm going to show the color matching more in depth in our next example, back in our desert. But I do want to show something that's very specific to screen replacements, and that is adding a reflection. Now, if we look back at our original footage, they've put green on here. And even though that seems like that's an easier choice, it doesn't really make our job easier at all, because we weren't keying anything, we weren't replacing anything.
Right.
I think a lot of times they just film green on here so that when people browse through stock footage, they can see, we can replace that screen.
Right.
But adds a few more problems. We can see there's a lot of green spill light on this lady's face. It's not going to matter much if you're doing this in a corporate video or anything. I wouldn't even bother changing that. You could just put a mask on and desaturate part of her face, but it's not essential, because you want people to be looking at the screen.
Yeah. Masks are really hard to get at the moment as well. So
they are, definitely. And also having a bright color like green means there's no real information about the reflection of this screen. If this was a black screen, we could just turn on our layer and apply the screen blending mode, and it would work perfectly. But we don't have that. We've got a green layer, so we're going to have to fake a reflection. So my method for doing that is duplicating this screen replacement. Let's get back to the start. This footage at the bottom, which I've called screen replacement, which is just this footage of this lady. I'm going to drag that all the way over to the top of the footage, and I'm going to right-click and go to time and freeze frame. So we just have a still from this image. And then I'm going to scale this up and rotate it over here, just so I have another part of the image, and apply the screen blending mode. Now we want something that looks kind of like this just on the screen, so we can see there's a bit of variations of light and dark. Oh, excuse me for a second. Sorry, I burp when I'm nervous. There we are. Okay, so we need to isolate this reflection just at this screen. Now we already duplicated our iPad screen to use as an alpha mat for itself, so we can just copy that, duplicate that with Control D, move that above our screen replacement, and then on our footage, our little reflection footage, our track mat, we can just change to alpha mat. So now that's limited to just our screen, and it just adds a bit more of a, looks like there's some realistic lighting in there. And I'd also might want to add the effect curves, and maybe increase the contrast here.
I like that we've frozen on a bat's butt.
Yes, of course. Look, it's essential.
It is.
And it already looks quite a bit more realistic. How are we doing for time down there?
We've probably got about another 9 minutes or so, a couple of minutes, then we're going to do some Q&A. So I haven't seen too many questions in chat. Yesterday we had heaps, so we've got those to go through. But for those in chat, if you do have a question for Ben, the time will come very soon. So hit us up.
Definitely. Okay, what I might do quickly then is show how to just cover up this thumb.
The thumb.
So if we go, I'm going to create a new null object. A new null object, and the null object is just a blank object that's invisible. It doesn't do anything except you can use it to influence other properties. So you can parent things to this object and to this null object, and then when you move the null, those other objects move. But we're going to use this as a target for tracking. So we're going to go into choose our screen replacement again, go into tracker, and then choose track motion, and we just need this default transform tracker. And then we're going to move this over to our thumb, and I'm going to find an area of some contrast. I might increase the size of these boxes here because it's not as clearly defined as the edge here. Maybe the area of the most contrast is going to be this little bottom corner here, where we get some light and dark and some bright pixels as well. And because we're in the middle of our footage, we can't just track forward or backwards. So I'm going to move to the beginning of the footage in our timeline and then just realign this here. And our target is going to be its null object 1 by default, our new null that we made, just because that's highest in our layer stack. But you can just click edit target and choose it from here. And then we're going to click analyze forward, and it will track this thumb. Now we might, have a little 1 minute break while this is tracking, and
I'll ask the first question while it's tracking then.
Sure.
Where is this footage from? Like, is this stock?
This stock is from which specific stock website?
I think the original question was it stock? And I'm assuming
yes.
it is definitely
Yes,
stock,
it's the stock footage. I didn't film this. It is from a stock website. Adobe also has a stock website where you can sign up. You can get 10 free images if you sign up there. But they have loads of pro stock footage. But this may or may not have been from Adobe's stock. But it is stock.
And do you have any tips for tracking really shaky footage?
Really shaky footage. What you can do is stabilize that footage first. If you do as much of that first, like even if you want it to be shaky, if you stabilize it first and then track it, and then reshake it somehow, you can normally invert the stabilizer. That is really the best way to do it.
Oh, right. I didn't realize you could reshake. I've never heard of anyone like unstabilizing footage. That's
you can definitely do that. So if you have a character sort of running and their head's bobbing up and down, you can stabilize that footage. Like, I'm not an expert in all of this stuff, but there's plenty of tutorials out on YouTube, and you can find you'd stabilize it so their head is pretty much the same, and then you just put someone else's head over the top, and then you can reshake it. Like, I think you can just normally, if you'd add the same stabilizing properties and flip the Y and X axis of both of them, it should work. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but you can do that, and that's the way I'd approach it.
I like that.
All right,
in theory, that should work. Test it out
in theory,
for yourself. See how it works in practice.
Yeah. All right, so we've got this. Our track point looks to have tracked pretty well. So we're going to click apply, and we want the X and Y dimensions. Okay. So now we've got a whole lot of keyframes here. We can hide that on our screen replacement footage, but on our null, that has its position keyframed here. So now what we can do is add, what we can do is, I'm just going to what's the best way to do this? I'm going to create a new shape layer with that pen tool and just sort of, I'm not clicking any layer, and draw a rough round shape around this thumb, and then parent that to our null object. I'm going to call this thumb mat, because we always label our layers.
We do.
And now this purple blob will follow our thumb. So now we just need our iPad screen to be, well, we need our thumb to be visible over here. Okay, so what order do I do that in? So I can just duplicate, I think, our screen replacement down here, our original footage, move that under our thumb mat, and then on track mat, choose alpha mat. So now we've got a dint in our line over here. So now we can go into our thumb mat and really get precise here. I might add, maybe I don't need to add, maybe I can just move these anchor points and cover up this finger. And we do want a bit of a softer edge. So we can add a Gaussian blur effect to that. And we've got a nice soft edge. And now our thumb sort of overlaps our footage nicely.
It's those little details. It's a little bit of what we were what I noticed in yesterday's stream is there were some subtle details. It felt like you're getting a lot in the weeds with some of that stuff. And we talked after the stream, and I know you do because you said you do. But also it really adds to it, doesn't it? It really is about like those small steps to an animation. Like the reflection's really subtle by itself. The thumb's very subtle by itself. The color correction very subtle. But collectively it all adds up. And I'm sure if we looked comparison between just the first tracking and now, how more realistic the more you work on it,
Yeah, definitely. So here it is just without, even the reflection in the thumb, and it just helps to put it in the environment so much more. And really compositing is just about trying to make it, remove any sort of inkling or idea that this, may have, come from some other footage, because it only needs to be, one moment where people think, that's not that footage, and they're taken, out of that scene, and it's just not believable. Like when you see like old movies when they like, not necessarily even old movies, just movies with like poorly done green screen and the effects look really cheap. You're like, no, okay, this isn't. I'm not in a fantasy world. That's just they've just put the Rock's head on some.
they're not driving a car.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
cars
the steering wheel that doesn't line up with the
and
footage is
people always
great.
driving like this, as if they're like like swerving up a mountain.
Yeah, exactly. We can take. Why don't we take a couple of questions? How about that?
Oh, sounds perfect.
And keep them coming, everyone. If we can't get them to now, we've got some time at the end to jump into some questions. So Des was asking in the chat, do you think you might do a tutorial on best render settings for various outputs like YouTube, Instagram, etc.? Which is a great question because I deal with this a lot as well, and it's such a depth of knowledge. Once you start trying to figure it all out, there's always a best, but how do you find the best?
Definitely. Okay, well, I keep mine really simple. I export my things in the same format for everything, pretty much. So, like, we'll have one for a ProRes and one for regular things. So let's add this to the render queue with Control M, and I can show you my settings down here. So I have with output module, I have a couple of default ones that I've created some templates. So an alpha ProRes 4444. Which is for when I need to export with transparency at a high res. I have a ProRes 422 HQ, which is when I need to export as high res. But really, like I spend the majority of my time exporting for YouTube and Instagram, where high res isn't that important. It's going to get compressed on their end anyway. Most clients don't. They ask for high res files, but they're just uploading them to Facebook and YouTube at their end anyway.
Right.
So H264, and I have it. Call it 70 because it's at 70% quality. That's my preferred setting. So if we go in here and take a look, I use a plugin called After Codecs, which is just an easy way to get sort of a H264 render straight out of After Effects. And I think the plugin costs like $70. And at the time, you couldn't export certain QuickTime formats on a PC. Like you couldn't get export to ProRes on a PC. Now you can do that through Media Encoder. But But yeah, so now you probably don't need this plugin, but it's just really easy for me to just, I press Command M, select H.264, and then render, and it does the same thing. But I'll open up Media Encoder as well.
I was going to ask, do you normally export within After Effects, or do you use Media Encoder a lot, or?
I normally just do it straight through After Effects, mainly because I have this that plugin which just lets me do that, because
Right.
Media Encoder takes a while to open that we'll see here. But I export for YouTube out of Premiere through Media Encoder because that's easiest. And if you're just sending to export through Media Encoder, the default setting is a H.264 MP4, and H.264 is the encoder setting. Sorry, the codec. We've got see, we can see other things already left in my queue from my other projects, and yeah, let's delete that. And yeah, you can just see it's H.264 match bitrate, and this will just pop out a really nicely compressed file that a few megabytes, but is really, oh my god, what's it done? Yeah, we can see the settings here, and I don't change the default, and that's all I do for everything I upload to YouTube and everything I send to Instagram. If you wanted it to be sort of higher quality, you could maybe change like some of these settings down here, like change it from a bitrate from 1 pass to 2 passes, and increase the bitrate. But for my purposes, that's just fine. I just keep it simple. Some people prefer to render out of Media Encoder, so you can still keep using After Effects. I think technically rendering out of After Effects will be quicker, but it much of a muchness. I'm not really exporting, doing multi-hour long renders at the moment. I used to back in my staff positions when you'd have to, set renders overnight. But if you're doing lots of 3D things, that's your life. But mainly I'm doing, short like 2D loops, so it's not too much of an issue. But the default MP4 setting, that's what I'd recommend. I don't do anything fancy.
Oh, cool. Quite like that. Festus was asking, what's the ideal format for stock footage? So for the best editing to output.
Oh, so the best footage the best footage for the stock footage. Like normally they give you an option to download an MP4, which is like what we exported, which is pretty that's a output file. So that's it's not low resolution. It's the same resolution, but it's got a lot more compression. These ones I downloaded. Let's reveal these in my project, and we can see where they are. These are, I didn't say the settings here, but I think these ones are MOVs. Like I download just a high res one, because the more you want to reduce the quality at the end of the project, because if this means if it was 4K footage, we could zoom in and get a tighter shot, or there might be on the uncompressed version there's going to be more information to track as well. So if space isn't really an issue, I think big hard drives are pretty cheap these days. So find larger hard drives and just download the biggest file they have available. Normally, if it's I wouldn't download a 4K thing out of a Red camera that's going to be half a terabyte. That's not really necessary. That's just going to get in the way and take more time to track and work with. You can work with proxies in After Effects and in Premiere that make that quicker. But what that is just it renders out a low quality version for you to work at, and then you can render using the larger quality. But whatever your workflow allows, but normally on stock sites, they don't, it's not, you either have, a low res one or a high res one. And normally I choose the higher resolution, not resolution, the higher file size, with less compression is what I mean.
Andrew has a question that I would love to know the answer to as well. Hey, Andrew. Do you have any plans on expanding your YouTube channel to other things outside of animation, like your illustration work? Because your illustration is very fun, and I agree.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I definitely want to sort of broaden the channel slowly. I think I've done one tutorial that's just based on design, like adding texture in After Effects. But I definitely want to do that because, I think that's a lot more scalable. There's only, so much, there's a limit to how much After Effects knowledge I can put out before, it runs dry. Hopefully that won't be for a long time because there's, new techniques coming up and I'm still constantly learning. But yeah, I definitely want to do some more design stuff and more businessy sort of freelance stuff as well, and more sort of principles of animation. There's not just how to do this one specific thing. Here are the technical steps to achieve it. A bit more just, talking about the industry as a whole. But I think I'm going to do that sort of slowly because, well, when I released that one Photoshop tutorial, it didn't really do well. So I'm like, okay, well, are people just watching my channel? But like, we just want After Effects. Don't waste our time with this other stuff. But good to know that people in the chat want to see some of that.
Yeah, totally. I certainly do. I love your illustration style. I knew you as an illustrator long before the animation stuff. So got another question from Des, which is, do you use master properties in After Effects?
I don't really use master properties that much. Master properties, they're what you can use to make templates, I believe. So you can set up a property. So if you have, lots of comps like lower thirds, you can do all the animation in one comp, and then you can sort of have, duplicates that reference that master comp, like master pages in InDesign, I guess.
Right.
So it's like a little template. So you can, in those individual comps, change the names and, change those things. But then you can go back and alter the animation in the main comp, and that'll permeate throughout all of them. If I was in some of my old jobs where I was having to do like dozens of different supers for people's different names, I would definitely be using them. But they just really haven't just popped into my workflow at the moment, because most of my stuff tends to be, less sort of, I suppose, templatized, and it's more specific to one scene. But they're definitely useful. I haven't gone deep into master properties really.
Okay, cool. One or two more questions, and we'll get back to it. But Sarah says, "How are you doing?" Which is nice. It's a nice way to.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm doing well.
Do you have any suggestions on what to include in a motion design portfolio? Like, what is enough to show your clients to show that you do motion design?
Definitely. This is one video that I've
never-ending question.
Yes. This is like something that I've been planning to do a video for a while on, like, especially like what to put in a show reel. Like, really, I think just a show reel, that's the main thing you should focus on. Have a website and have, that should be, here's the show reel if you want to, and that should be enticing people to, we want to see more, let's go and look at their website. But I find most people just look at the show reel and then go straight to someone's Instagram, really.
Right.
Like a website isn't quite as important these days. I think it's still important to have. You can get one, you can make one pretty cheap on somewhere, or even use like Behance's. They've got portfolios, which are free, and just something that needs to collect your work nicely. But I think it depends on what kind of work you're after. If you want to get a job as a staff position, they probably want you to be a bit of a Swiss Army knife and know a lot of things. So in that show reel, you might put in a large variation of all sorts of different work, like, I can do motion tracking on here. I can make like some tech looking UI stuff, but I can also, here's some sort of characters that I can animate. You want to show sort of the breadth of all things that you can make. If you were after, when I was freelancing, like my show reels have just gotten narrower and narrower and more specific to, hey, I do 2D animated sort of characters that are kind of fun. Like, I don't put in any of my tracking into drone shots and other stuff, even though they might look cool, because that's not the work I want to make. You got to put stuff in your show reel, like the work that you want to attract as well, because a lot of times people won't have sometimes a good, a creative director will see your show reel and think, they've got awesome animation skills. I can throw whatever at them and they can handle it, not like normally. But if you're going direct to client, if they can't see text tracked onto a wall, they think you can't do that. They think that's a service you can't offer. So you might want to put more of that in there. That's the work you want to do. So I think maybe try to start broad, I guess. But if you're a freelancer and you just want to attract specific work, just put really niche stuff in there and make it short. 30 seconds to a minute is all you need. You don't need heaps of work. It's better to be shorter and just have a lot of impact, so they think, oh wow, those projects all looked awesome. They only make awesome stuff. This is great. Where if you try to make it longer and pepper in some of your not weaker projects, just less good ones, it brings the average down a little bit. And a reel that's too short is way better than a reel that's too long. And anything over a minute is when people start to think, okay, let's wrap this up. Like if you look at some of some animators that you really admire, like some of the people top in the industry, you'll notice a lot of their reels are really short. I remember like my first reel was way too long. Mine was like a minute 40. And my latest
Right.
one is 40 seconds. And like, so it's actually only 30 seconds of animation. But like you see someone that's like I think Ariel Costa, one of like my big animation heroes. His reel is only like 40 seconds, so it makes me think like do I think I'm better than him that I need to have like I deserve more footage than that? Of course, there's that's not the how the ratio works, but as long as you can as long as you need to communicate what you're about, but
Yep.
keep it short and just put your best stuff in. That's what I'd
Short
say.
and sweet. That's good advice. We might ask one more question as we jump back in, but because I think it's a shorter answer. So many questions. We will get to these at the end. Promise we have time for it. So and maybe we can have a quick look at your show reel that you were just talking about at the end too, Ben.
Yeah, sure.
Question from Alex. What drawing tablet do you use or recommend for illustration?
I use a Wacom Cintiq. It's a 22-inch one. It's the one that sits on the desk. It's not the companion that you can take away. Mine is really old. Mine's from like 2014, I think. I think it's 6 years old, and mine works fine. The Wacom ones they last a long time. There are loads of different ones out there now. Like there's loads of competitors. I know Huion make a really cheap one. Like honestly, really cheap. Low price, still good value. That are there's like I bought my one for like 3,000 Australian dollars because like there was back then getting a screen that you could draw on was like really expensive. Now you
Yeah.
can get one with a screen for like a Wacom one for $500, and I hear very good things about them. But also use an iPad as well, like an iPad Pro. There's lots of you can use Adobe Sketch and Fresco on that as well, which are really handy. That I use for when I want to draw on the couch. But I mean, I recommend Wacom ones because they're really high quality. But other ones are really good as well. You don't need to nowadays. You don't need to splash out an awful lot of money. I definitely think they're worth trying. And if you've got the money to go on with a screen, that helps so much. Yeah.
Cool. Very good. Thanks, guys. That's some great questions. We'll get back to some in a little bit. And for those who weren't here yesterday, I think I'm just going to show you a very short reel, your 8-second reel before
Yes.
as we fade
Oh,
into.
that's my. This is my the intro to my my YouTube channel, which kind of works as a reel, just showing off a bunch of the animations I can do.
Awesome, and it features the bat. And you get it in 8 seconds. I love it. So good.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is go back into this desert scene, and we're going to add our character, and we're going to need to extract some green screen from them. We're going to need to key out the green screen. So let's open our comp. So we've got a lady here, and she's just going to raise her arms, in a perfectly natural thing you do all day. So, and I chose this example because this is filmed, you can tell this was filmed in a studio. It's got the shadows here. So we're going to have a lot of examples to see, how we can remove this green effectively. One thing that I like to do when I'm keying out footage is add a solid in the background that's a really bright, different color. So if you press Control Y, it brings up, you can create a new solid that's the size of your comp. And I want to choose like a really bright sort of pink, and then just put that behind our layer. So then when we, make it transparent, it's really obvious, what's coming through and what's not. So keying out green screen is pretty easy in After Effects. You want to add the effect key light. There's a few different methods to, a few different effects that can key out a screen, but key light works pretty good. That's mainly the standard for keying out footage. And here we've just got our screen color option here. So we just select the eyedropper and pick a green that's pretty even throughout our scene. Like we can see there's some darker areas of green and some lighter ones. We just want to pick somewhere in the middle. Around here is fine. And you can see in one click, we've removed a lot of the green. Pretty much she's behind, she's pretty much cut out pretty nicely against this pink background. But there are a few things that we might not notice at first. So if we toggle on and off this footage, you can see there's a whole lot of gray still over here. And if we go to, right now we're viewing final result, if we go to screen matte, we can see what's actually matted out. The black is the area that is removed. So we can see there's still a whole lot of gray, a whole lot of elements of that green screen that we haven't removed, which are the shadows. So what we can do now is go into screen matte, toggle down here, and we can clip the black and the white values. So we can, if we drag clip black, it's just going to like increase the threshold and just remove all of those elements. And with white, we're going to clip the white, we're going to reduce that a bit because we want just a black and white image like that. So let's go and view our intermediate result now. And we can see that that's just so much cleaner. We've got, if we toggle it on and off, there's no difference in this pink background here.
Wow.
Now this looks pretty good, but there's a few things that we still need to do to it. So let's hide this background layer. And here's one. You can see she's got this green glow all on the outside of her. And you can even see that's like underneath her and on her hands here. And this is spill from the green screen. So light comes in, hits the green screen, bounces off, and puts green light on her hands. Now, you can avoid a lot of this with how you set up and shoot your green screen element if you're there to shoot it. And it's hard to do. You need to have lights that point directly at the person and remove the amount of, light splashing back on them. And really the best way to do that is have them as far away from the green screen as possible. And she looks like she was in a pretty big studio. So even in a large studio, it's hard to do. But we've got some effects that are going to really help us with this. So one effect is called a key cleaner. And we're going to add this, and we're not going to notice. Oh, sorry, we're adding that to the wrong layer. Add that to this layer. And at the moment, that doesn't do much. All this does is kind of extend. We can see that it's just sort of extending out our object here. And we don't want it to be quite as far out as this. So we can go back over here into our key light, and we've got screen shrink glow. So we can adjust this, and that shrinks it in or expands it. Let's put it back, and let's shrink glow by minus 1, I think is enough. And then we need to remove the spill. So there's a really easy way to do that, a really simple effect, and that is called advanced spill suppressor. And we're just going to click on this, and let's see what that does. Wait, all right, let's try that again. Done. Alright, one click, and it removes all of that green light. I don't know how it does it, but it just reads that, we want to remove green from around the edges and even under the hands.
And when it removes the green, what does it add in? Is it adding in, what's it adding in replacement of the green?
I think what it's doing is just finding green and just desaturating the green areas. So on the suit here, it's just saying, all right, well, there's a green light here. Let's desaturate that and darken it a little bit.
Cool.
I believe. Yeah. And there we are. We can see within key cleaner, when we turn this on and off, the key cleaner is adding a bit more of a softer edge here, and we can adjust that by moving this down here. And we kind of want a little bit of a soft edge, because if it's too hard, that's not really how camera will pick up the slight blurriness of that. And we can see here it's cutting in on the hair a bit as well. So maybe our screen shrink glow was a little bit too intense. Now, keying is something you could spend your whole career getting right. Normally, if it's on a big Hollywood movie, you might have dozens of different keys, one to extract the hair, one to extract the the body shape, and they'd all be matted and animated. But for most uses that most motion designers or for any sort of regular standard commercial project, just adding these 3 effects and doing those things will work really well. So let's go back into our desert scene, and now we can see if we were to just overlay this green screen lady. We've got our pink layer visible. Let's turn that off. Now she's completely extracted. Now, I've also extracted another piece of footage, which is of this man dancing. And I think we're going to use this one because it's just a bit more fun. So let's get rid of our green screen lady, because dancing is, way more fun. And look at him go.
I'm getting some 90s vibes.
Absolutely. So at the moment, he doesn't look too bad here. It kind of looks like he's kind of standing on this desert already, but he isn't really. We need to track him into this footage. So an easy way to do that is to let's select his anchor point. Like go up here to our move anchor point tool. And right now that's in the middle of that composition. And let's move that right down to his feet, right down here. So that's where he's going to be positioned. We're going to use that as the information of like, this is where our character is. And let's make him a 3D layer. And at the moment, he's a 3D layer, but he's still, really close to the camera, like this text is here.
He's popping and locking himself way off frame.
Absolutely. This is what you call when footage is, sliding, if it's not tracked properly.
Right.
But an easy way to get sort of tracking information is we've already got heaps from our tracking camera. So we can see over here, all of these points we could use the tracking information for. So let's find a point. We need to select our, selection tool over here. And we can just hover over one of these points. I think over here might be pretty good. Maybe this one. And we can just right click and it gives us options. We can create text at that point, a solid or a null. And let's create a null. So what that does is create a tracking null. And similar to our other tracking null with our thumb replacement, this null is just sticking to that point in the footage. So now what we can do is with our green screen guy, we can open up, let's open up both of their position properties with P on the keyboard. I can alt click his position, which brings up our expression window. We're not going to type in any expressions. We're just going to grab the pick whip and then move that to this position. And that will add the expression, hey, take this comp's position from this null's position. So whatever position this null is in, our dancing guy will be in. And we click enter. And as we do that, we can see he gets really small because we haven't.
That'll make Festus happy. He said he seems so huge in comparison to the rock and the road.
Yes. Oh, well, we want a giant man dancing, but here we can see now if we play it forward, he is tracked into this footage perfectly.
He's wherever this doing well at practicing self-isolation. I'll give him that.
Absolutely, he's there. And now we can bring up scale with pressing S on our keyboard, and we can scale him up as much as we want. And he's going to say tracked into this footage here. Now, he looks still really out of place. You can tell really easily that he is not meant to be in this footage. Now, the main obvious thing is his color. Like over here, we've got some pretty, in the background, some pretty sort of faded shadows that have a bit of blue in them. And, even at the front, there's a lot of red in here. Now, there's a few ways we can, there's one technique that I really love to color match really easily. But one of the first things we're going to do is adjust, not his lighting, but because the lighting is the biggest thing that makes a footage, seamlessly integrate with another. And the problem is, like this footage here, like the only light source is the sun. So we get these harsh shadows on the left here. This guy is being lit from, probably 2 or 3 lights. So he's pretty evenly lit. But ideally we want his main shadow to be on the left. And it looks like, where is that? Is a shadow on the left there? It looks like it is actually. So we might, that's pretty good. If we wanted to, we could go into here and go layer, transform, flip horizontal, and see if that looks better in here. Actually, that might look better a bit here. We can see on his leg here, we've got his shadow on the left. All right, so that's how we want our guy to be positioned. Now let's go and match his color. So the way I would, I kind of used to do this was to just add a curves effect and maybe a hue saturation and try to, like desaturate him and then maybe go up to the red channel and increase the redness. And, he starts to look a little bit more integrated in the scene.
Right.
But that takes a bit of, knowledge and experience to kind of see what elements are out of place. But a much easier way to do it is let's turn off this hue layer. Let's just put that to 0 and reset our curves. An easier way to do it is to just look at one color channel at once. So down here, we have an option to view all of our different color channels. So we can view just the red channel, just the green one, or just the blue, or even, a bunch of different versions. In Photoshop, this is like, viewing your channels. And it's this I'd use the same process for color matching and compositing in Photoshop as well. So with our red channel selected, we want to zoom out here. Let's hide our text for a moment. And we want to go to our curves layer and select our red channel. And what we want to do is just make this image look right using the red channel. So at the moment, I can see there's way too much contrast in him. So I'm going to bring our blacks lower by moving this curve slider up here on the left. And already that looks pretty good. The red on the outside, is that going to look, we don't want it to add more contrast, maybe a little less, maybe drag it down here like this. And already he looks, a lot better in that scene. So we know the red channel is pretty similar now between these two pieces of footage.
So what are you actually using as the anchor there? Like, what are you measuring there? You're trying to make sure that the whites at one end of the spectrum are really, really white and the blacks are really black, or are you matching grays? What exactly are you aiming for there?
So I'm aiming for here. Let's reset that. I'm aiming to get him to look like he's in this footage. So I want the blacks on him to match the blacks in this scene.
Right.
So so the blacks here are pretty dark, not as dark as him. So we want to get our red channel and move that up. But actually, he's further in the distance, so he needs to have even less contrast, more similar to these background elements. So he needs even less black than that, and his whites are probably much brighter than the sky and the clouds here. So we can push down the contrast here, and we're just trying to, match those elements like that. And we see there's probably a bit too much contrast as well, even more. And we can come back and adjust these. And doing this on one channel at a time is just a lot easier than doing it all at once, because when you pull the red channel down, you might think, oh, well, now it needs more green. Well, now the green's too much. So you go in and fiddle with the green, and then you have to keep adjusting through either of the channels. But if you just at a time, we can say, all right, red's done. Let's move on to green. And it's going to be a similar process for each color. I mean, mainly because he's just got way too much contrast. So we need to remove the green from the, make the darkest green area a lot lighter. So not as much as the red, but something like this, and definitely turn down, adjust the curve down here so there's less contrast and maybe a bit less black. Then let's go to our blue channel. We need change that to blue up here. We need less blue here, and much less blue in the white area as well. Now that looks all right. Actually, there's still a lot of contrast in him here. Let's adjust it there. That's looking pretty good. Let's just go back and look at all of these. They look all right. And it's just kind of making him look like he's composited in each of these individual color channels. So now let's go back to RGB, and we can see he already looks way better. If we turn off his effects, so this is what we had before, and this is what we had now.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we can see his shadows are much bluer, similar to the background, and he just fits in a whole lot better.
Festus was asking, do you need to use a clipping mask to ensure it changes the color of the dude, or will it just naturally work on that layer?
Clipping mask? No, we're just applying the curves to this,
right?
To the layer of the green screen guy. We're not applying this to the whole footage. So yeah, it's just applying it to him.
Cool.
All right. Now let's now there's a few more things we need to do. So he is obviously in full focus. At the background, we don't have much. Shouldn't be it's in focus as much. So we can just add a Gaussian blur. And let's go in and see maybe 5% blur. Maybe we can do a bit more, maybe 8, and just sort of figure out how blurry he should be at this distance. And that looks pretty good, I reckon. That blur is going to be fine. And also we're going to notice that this footage has a lot of grain in there. So there's a few ways to add a specific grain, but we can just type in grain, and there's an add grain effect. Now it will just bring up a small window that we can preview it on, because grain takes a lot of your computer's resources. But we can see that this is probably, we can change the viewing mode from preview to final output, so it applies it to all of him. So this grain looks a lot heavier than it is in the scene. So we can take the intensity down. I'm just going to note that down with my arrow keys. So 0.5 maybe. There we are. Now that this grain is on, it's taking a lot longer to RAM preview because it's, adding all this extra bit of information on each of the scenes. But I'll just let that, run through.
Let that roll. While we're going, I'm going to ask a trivia question from
Trivia
Alex
question.
Mills. What's your favorite all-time Simpsons episode? Because we know you're a Simpsons fan.
Oh, there's so many. I really like. I think the Mr. Plow episode is I really enjoy that one. Mr. Plow, I think that's from season 4, I believe. Might be the end of season 3.
Might be end of
I
season
really
3, yeah.
like the monorail episode as well. Like there's classics like Lisa's Substitute from I think season 3. There might be even season 2 actually.
Oh, you're like early Simpsons, early season Simpsons fan. Wow.
Absolutely. Early Simpsons are great. I really like The Simpsons. I listen to like Simpsons podcast where they talk for 2.5 hours about analyzing each episode of The Simpsons.
That the 4-finger discount?
I listen to Talking Simpsons, but I hear 4-finger discount is really good as well.
Yeah.
I'll go back through with a 4-finger discount as well. But yeah, The Simpsons is great and I appreciate it more and more. The more I look back at it. But yeah, those are great episodes, but there's so many great episodes. Season 3 through even 10, even 11 has great episodes. But probably between 4 and 7 are where you get the best stuff.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. Correct answer was the Scorpio episode.
Oh yeah, You Only Move Twice. That is a great episode. Oh, that's so fun.
What about you, chat? Anyone got a favorite episode? Alex, you've got to give us yours now that you've asked that question, by the way. That's the rule.
Absolutely. So now we've got him a green screen in here. One thing that is really easy to add is his shadow. So he's missing a shadow here. So a real easy way to do that is duplicate this with Control D, which creates a new layer. And in this new layer, we can remove all these effects. We don't need his shadow to have grain and blur and those things. Actually, let's keep the blur on there. We'll delete the everything else, and we're going to bring up its rotation, and we are going to select, like when you have a 3D layer, it has more rotation properties. We've got a Z rotation as well. So we don't want Z rotation. We want, it always takes me, I have to run through all of them to remember which axis we want to rotate. So we want the X-axis, and we just want to rotate this. Minus 90 degrees is where we want it. So now it's flat on the ground. And so we've got like a little duplicate of him down there. And let's add a fill effect. Oops. Fill. And I'm going to eyedrop. You think you want to eyedrop one of the shadows, but because we're going to add a changes blending mode to multiply, so we can see a bit of the background in there, that's way dark. So maybe I want to take a shadow way behind here, like a really light color in the distance that's got a bit of blue in there. So now we've got a bit of a shadow down here, and we need to turn that blurriness all the way up because it's way too sharp, that shadow. You wouldn't have a shadow that sharp unless there was like a real spotlight really close to him with really defined edges. So let's change this blurriness from 8 to 40. See how that looks. That's way too low. 200. Way too high. Too high. Let's go back. 100. Okay. And that's a bit better. We could probably go to 80. There we are. And that's looking pretty good. We can also add a feathered mask. If we just select our rectangle tool and draw over sort of the bottom side of his shadow, we're getting really close here, and press F on our keyboard to bring up our mask feather. We can feather that mask so then his head is, less visible than his legs because they would be, further away, that have more light, coming through and messing up that shadow, so it wouldn't be as defined near his head. So a feathered mask can do that. And let's increase the feathering to probably 600 because we still want a bit of that visible. But really, that's, where, cutting hairs here. All right. So now we've got his shadow pretty much down pat. And I think he's pretty well composited in. So those are like
amazing difference.
My main tips, if we, take back all of those effects of him, it makes, a real world of difference just having the lighting in there. And, it's not perfect. This might not pass in a motion picture you'd see at the movies. But with, they would light him in order in a really specific way that it matches this scene, and they'd have a lot more tools. Maybe not even a lot more tools. They just have better prepared assets for this.
Right.
But
I mean,
if
hey,
this was
it's better than cats, so that's
yeah,
fine.
yes, of course, yeah. There's no clipping of his feet in the floors. He's got all his hands.
Exactly.
Way better than cats.
That should be the title of today's episode. Better than cats.
Yeah.
I love it. That's fantastic. What do you think about some Q&A?
Yeah, I'm dying for some Q&A. Hit me with them. Hit me with some, I want to find out Alex's favorite Simpsons episode as well.
He's in a meeting, so I'm sure he's...
well, let's interrupt him. This is important.
Let's interrupt him. I'll give him a call. Let's get him on the call. Quick video chat with Alex. We're just going to pretend it's Stonecutters.
Exactly. Another great episode.
They have to come back and correct us. So yeah, great time for questions, guys. We've probably got about 15 minutes for Q&A. And I thought for visual, let's have a look at us. But Ben, maybe you could bring up. There were some questions about portfolio and showing your work. Do you have maybe we could either look at your website or we could look at Instagram just while we're waiting for some questions to come through?
Yeah, definitely look at pull up my website. Let me find a web browser.
Yep.
To open up. Cool. Let's drag a browser window in here.
And for everyone, while Ben's doing that, we are back tomorrow. Again, we've got a longer session. So just like today, we've got an hour and a half with Ben. It is our final episode for a while with Ben, but not for too long. I'm definitely going to be asking Ben back. Mm-hmm. During this time, we're ramping up streaming a lot at the moment. Obviously, bringing as much content to you as we can kind of manage while we're all spending quite a lot of time at home. So let us know in chat or outside of chat. Find us online and let us know what you want to see, because we're putting all this stuff together behind the scenes, all sorts of stuff in illustration and animation and UX and all sorts of stuff. So let me know, let us know, and we'll bring you some good stuff. And free cube animation, check that out. I did that.
Oh, tasty. All right, so here's my website that we've got here. At the top, I have my showreel, and I've just got a embedded Vimeo link in here. And then down below, some of projects. I think all of these are in the showreel. Some of them are a bit more recent, so they're not in the showreel. That's what everyone always says on my website. Hasn't been updated in a while, so this is hasn't got the newest stuff in there. Mainly because I'm mainly doing education stuff on YouTube, so I'm less chasing clients by showing them new work. So this reel is more than a year old, and so are some of these projects. But I haven't put an awful lot of crazy time into my website. I don't think it needs to be really. It just needs to show your work. That's the main important thing. That's what people are there for. And I put my reel just at the very top. So that's, hey, this is big. Oh, it means, I want you to click on this and watch this. So I can play this, and you won't get the sound, but you're going to see lots of animation. And I think this is 44 seconds. And these are mainly personal projects as well. Don't be afraid of not showing client work in there. Show your best work. That's more important. No one really cares if you did that for yourself or your cousin's honey making company, or if you made that for Google. The work, they want you to just make that work for them. I think it can be valuable saying you've worked for big companies, so that they can say, oh, that he knows how they know how the feedback and the process, and he's been industry tested. But if most of the time, like mine was, my personal work was more interesting than my corporate work, so that's what I stacked my reel with, and it hasn't been an issue for me. And also, I start off my reel with my sort of strongest animation. So I thought this sort of transition of the coffee really just says, all right, in a few seconds, all right, I can do some complicated sort of transitions with some fun design, and then towards the middle, put some of my weaker projects, and then I think at the end, you want to end on something strong as well. And I just think I have a lot of fast things at the end here.
Yeah.
And then I've just got a few seconds of, my name. I don't think you need to put, your phone number and your website and your email address at the end. If they're watching your reel, they're watching it on your Vimeo or your website or somewhere. So put the information below. You can maybe check your website in there or your social handle, but, you don't need to go overboard.
Cool. Have a question.
Yes.
Tyson. Thanks for the question, Tyson. How important is it to be skilled in multiple design areas, or is just be an expert in one area like 2D animation?
So the specialize versus generalize conundrum.
Mhm.
Um, like I go really back and forth on this. Like probably a year ago, I would say specialize, definitely specialize. But
Mm.
I think but I kind of think, and I kind of see myself as like, oh, I specialize in 2D animation, but I really think what's been most valuable in my career is having a more generalized knowledge, like knowing about having a background in design and illustration, and now doing some excuse me, like education as well on YouTube. Like it's the combination of things that make you a rarer sort of asset in a sense.
Mm.
I definitely think you should start generalizing. Like I think everyone should, get a staff position, work there for 2 or 3 years, get a sense of the industry, and figure out what you like and what you don't like, because that will change enormously. Like I wanted to be a designer when I started uni. When I left, I wanted to be an illustrator, and then it was only when I discovered, After Effects and animation that I thought, no, bugger that. I want to really concentrate on
Mm.
animation, and that's what I've done. So, like, I really think ideally, you get a general broad sense of the different areas, and then specialize down in one thing, and then try to keep adding to that. I know people use the word T-shaped. So you have a shallow knowledge of lots of skills, and then a
Mm.
deep knowledge of one skill. So your knowledge graph looks a bit like a T, and that those people can generally collaborate better with other people because they know a little bit. Like I know a tiny bit about 3D animation, not a lot to sell it as a service. I do my own, but I kind of know how files and design should be prepared for them. So that's a little bit. It's easy to work with someone that knows a little bit about what you do.
Mm.
But it's up to you. Like like I think like, what do you guys think in the chat? Like, do you think I'm a specialist or a generalist? Because I really don't know. Like a lot of stuff on my on my sort of portfolio and reel, like I think it has a pretty consistent sort of look. Like it has a consistent sort of tone and texture. But I kind of have, people describe it as having style, like ADD. Like I get bored of stuff really quickly. Sometimes I just want to use texture and grain. Then other times I want to use sort of just flat design and things like that. So I really think just follow what you want to do and make what you want to make, and a style or a skill set will naturally develop around you that you're most suited for.
Mm.
I think, if that's helpful at all. I know that's a lot of maybe. I don't know, but
Well, it's great advice because it is very variable. Like, it's going to be a bit different for each person, and the feedback is a little bit different depending on where you're at in your career. Like if you're starting out, it's important to kind of get as much experience as possible to figure out, as you said, what you like and don't like. Because I presumably you never would have thought that you'll be in a situation where the big part of what you're doing is educating people on YouTube how to animate. And I'm sure that you
definitely.
didn't. I mean, based on what you've just said, your career path, there's no way when you would I want to be an illustrator now that lo and behold, 5 years later, here you are. It's quite a
Yeah,
different thing you couldn't have really imagined.
definitely. I definitely think
Gorgeous.
yeah. I think you should like. I think if you're going to go 2D or 3D, I think that's go one or the other. Really, like it's well. I know it's hard to say because if you're going to spend so many hours into developing something, it seems like more logical to spend. If you spend more hours on one thing, you're going to get to a higher level in that one thing rather than being medium at both. Like if you're a company gets a project and we need to hire, we've got a 3D section and a 2D section. They're going to want to hire the best 3D person and the best 2D person,
Mm.
not two people that are kind of good at both, depending on the project. But if you're hiring someone for, a staff position, you want them to do a lot of stuff. So you'd want them to be able to cover more bases instead of hiring, you can hire one person for the price of two, and you get a balance of skills there. So yeah,
Mm.
it depends what work you're after.
Absolutely. It's great. We have another question. Summon, thanks for the
Mm-hmm.
question. Suman, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly. I have a habit of that. What are some skills that would make you stand out in the motion field right now? Like specific
Right.
techniques
Oh,
or style, so on.
I have a very clear and confident answer in that, and that is AR. If you understand AR
Wow.
animation, like that's just there is over the last year, demand for that has just enormously blown up. And like one of my most successful tutorials is like me just showing how to make an AR filter in on Instagram, and
Mm.
I get probably every week someone asking me, hey, can you design make a filter for us? And I'm like, I literally only know what I said in that tutorial, the most basic thing. But people just think like there's so few people out there that have that filter and advertising that they have it. Like there's so much demand for it and just so little supply, and it's only going to get bigger. And I think, it's mainly how to because the animation is the same, it's just in a different space. That tends to favor more 3D animation because it's more in 3D environments. But you can still do 2D animation in there as well. But yeah, there's huge demand for AR, and that's only going to get bigger and bigger because as why I got drawn towards animation was because more things were becoming screens. So animation was more valuable than illustration because there was more options for things to move. And now screens aren't just becoming, the place for content isn't just screens. With AI, it's everywhere. So there's a huge boom for that. Now you're not limited to what you can design in put in a 2D way. If you can have some sort of interactive animation and stuff like that. And I know sort of real-time rendering, like with Unity and things like that, for film production and for AR and things like that. The technology is getting really insane and powerful for a normal person. But I think, and I've just rambled for a few minutes there about a lot of different things.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
I think Spark AR, which is Facebook's tool for authoring AR on Instagram, that was really the first marketable thing. Like at the moment, there's not like we make an AR, but how do we make some AR sort of animation, but how do we get it to someone? Do they have to download an app? Do they have to do this? But everyone's got Messenger and Instagram, so you can, and now they've got a free software where you can go and learn how to do it and do it yourself and publish it yourself. Now companies are like, all right, we can make something in AR and have, potentially hundreds of thousands of people use it within, a few weeks, before they're, and still now, that's really the only place you can kind of publish AR stuff. Adobe Aero, they've come out really recently as well. And that's great. And I did just a quick tutorial on that. And that was really successful. There's way more demand for that at the moment. I think you can make a lot of money because again, people don't know what to charge for it. So you can tell them, they're like, oh yeah, no, AR.
Like the .com boom back in the day where people were charging
exactly
making up numbers of what things cost. Yeah, it is. I love that just straight up answer. It's like, well, that's what's coming. That's what people are talking a lot about. It's what companies are talking about. If you look at any of the tech events or anything like that, there's always big AR components. It's very shareable. It's very social. It makes sense. I love it. Just straight up.
That's one thing I can be confident of. Normally answers are like, oh, maybe, depends. But
maybe this, maybe that. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Sarah was asking, do you plan on collaborating with any YouTubers in the future? Which is a cool question because I know you collaborated with our friend of the show, Demis Rusley, not that long ago. There's a great video up there about you guys collaborating. But yeah, do you plan on collaborating with any other YouTubers?
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely collaborating a lot with just illustrators at the moment because that's a really great way to hey, I can illustrate, I can animate something of yours. It's a really win-win for both of you, and that's especially as animators, that's something of value that we can add to someone. So you can approach maybe an illustrator that has maybe more of a following and say, hey, let me animate something of yours, and then we both post it. Everyone wins. You've got something cool to post. They've got something cool to post, and they don't have to do pretty much any work except give you a working file. And that's a really great way to collab, and that's kind of how I see myself doing a lot more of that on the YouTube. I know I've got a few more planned with a few more people as well, but YouTube specifically, I haven't got any sort of plan at the moment. I mean, Demas obviously has a great YouTube channel as well where he teaches lots of photography over there. But I would really love to do some stuff and collaborate with some more people in the education space. I've spoken a little bit to people like Evan Abrams and Jake Bartlett and Haley from Motion Hatch. So we might be doing some stuff together. There's nothing confirmed or planned. I just I will be approaching them soon to maybe do some things, but it can be just a little bit harder with YouTube stuff. I did actually an interview with Day Rates as well. They're an awesome YouTube channel that talk just really offhand, really down to earth talk about running a small studio in Sydney. So I did a little interview with them. So they're really awesome. But yeah, collaborating on video stuff, it's a little bit more difficult because everyone has different tones and equipment, and it's a bit hard to manage. Whereas taking someone's files and just animating them. It's kind of all very controlled, and like all the output comes through me. So, and I'm still really new to YouTube as well. So I'm, still a little bit nervous with finding my voice and appearing on camera, especially with other people and figuring all that stuff out. But yeah, I want to collaborate more. I think collaboration is, one of the best things you can do. So
Yeah,
I'll be doing
absolutely.
more of that.
I love it. Well, you're a natural. You're a natural on YouTube, so you're already there. I think we might wrap it up for today. Thank you for the questions. There's one or two that we may not get to, but we can sort of bring them over for tomorrow. We are back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Same channel, same place, behance.net/live. For those of you watching on YouTube, if you jump over to Behance and log in, you can ask questions. We're going to be doing lots of Q&A tomorrow as well, so come armed with questions. Thank you, chat. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe, for moderating the chat for us. And thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Flynn. Thanks for having me.
It's been awesome, and I'll see you tomorrow.
See ya.